Welcome to Oregon Voters Digest, the program that brings forward the social and political issues that are important to people living here in the Pacific Northwest. And now, your host, Bruce Broussard.
Welcome again, folks, to Oregon Voters Digest. I'm Bruce Broussard, your host. And by the way, I'm calling it golden hours, because in all due respect, golden hours is what we were into here at the city of Portland back when. And it was a beautiful city. City of roses, the whole 9-yard routine. And now all of a sudden, we've got a situation where it's not the same. And the new folks that are coming in are trying to figure out, well, where is it? And they're coming up with their own ideas and whatever. And the fact of the matter is that the transition should have been a smoother transition from the old to the young and whatever. And so consequently, that's where the concern is. And we've gone through an election process that we thought maybe that, hey, we put the committee together, the whole 9 yard. We thought that was a smooth transition. And right now, it's not working. Some people say, well, gee whiz, just give us time. We don't have the time. We got to get something done now. The summer is coming up, and we're going to have some other major problems. They're going to have this in other states, too. Everybody's got problems. But the fact of the matter is, we want to focus on what can we do here in Portland. We got a new committee. We got more folks that are sitting on the city council now. We got 4 districts. We got 3 committees. We got 12 commissioners and 1 mayor. We got a city manager? Where is that city manager? We got a new auditor, if you will. Somebody do the checks and balances, and I got that out from John. I'm just kind of like giving you a little preempt from the standpoint of what happened in this other show that we had that we want you to chat with. And that's what we're doing these shows. And we're doing these shows with people who have background. And that's why Rochelle is sitting here. She did the first show and aspect of it, and we talked about certain areas, aspect of it. It was an introduction piece because whether you like it, whether you know it or not, she's got background. She's run for office. She's been there. She's actually been on the ground dealing with folks. I mean, her monies and this. It's not a glamorous job, if you will, trying to help the folks. And all due respect, we need to realize. There are other folks like that would help also too. The only money that's needed might be gas and food or something like that, or coffee money. But the bottom line is, it's gotten so crazy that we've just basically put all of this money in this bank called contingency, and we're just spending it. And the folks who are running it are just spending it and not performing because they've not been there. And then the media, we relied on the media to basically keep everything in check, but it's not working anymore today. So we got to tell the media, we're educating the media too. Hey, folks sitting at the media, I realize it's for businesses. They're trying to sell their products. See, a negative sells more than a positive to pick up that paper. So now what we're saying is that, look, hey, we got a negative right now. It's called our environment. It's calling out the fact that we're getting ready to go into the summer and people are going to be concerned about needles in their yards. And another government program is providing needles at free of charge to the individuals who don't need the needles. We've got a county that's supposed to be dealing with the social issues and all that other stuff. And that's not happening. Other entities are duplicating it for whatever reason. We got a police force that's under the city. And then we got another police force that's under the county. And they're also the jailers. And we got buildings. I mean, we're picking up older homes and we're selling them at the open market as opposed to rehabbing them and putting the city of Portland is in the housing authority of Portland. And what they're doing is that they're renting folks out and this, that, and the other. But they have no system. They used to have a system, input, output, and throughput. The person signs up, they rent a room. They have to learn how to respond and respect that room and clean it up. Then they go to the second tier. They got a family. Then they move to a home, and then and then they get into home ownership, and they pay for it. They have a system. We don't have that system. No. So that's what we used to have that system. But some way, shape, or form, somebody thought about, well, gee whiz, maybe I can just talk my way up and just keep talking about it. Okay, so I've said that. I got Rochelle here now. I'm kind of getting you to the point that understand where I'm coming from. Go back to the first show that we had when I had with Rochelle, and look at what she's saying, and share that with your neighbors. Share it with your neighbors, and have that discussion. We're not trying to beat up on people who are sitting up there who went through the process of voting and got the vote, and they're sitting there. And yes, for this new form of $150,000 with the perks.
You know, I am not so much concerned about what people are getting paid, because
I'm
it's
just
very
saying-
expensive to live here. And I'll be honest, $150,000, depending on what your family size is necessarily
money.
not enough.
That's right.
But I'll tell you something. Most of our senior citizens are dealing with, what, 1/10?
Hey, look,
1/10 of that on Social Security, and
and
some
trying
of
to
them
keep
don't.
the house, trying
That's
to keep
right.
the house. And look here, it's hurting us.
Yes.
We can't pay the electric bills.
That's
See,
right.
We're in a homeless situation too.
That's what I wanted to talk about.
Oh my God.
So part of the problem, if I can
Keep going.
speak to this,
Let's go.
I want to speak to the fact that we know we have a houseless problem.
Yes.
And we know some of the factors that are involved in the houseless problem. We know that rents are too high. We know that drugs have been a factor, lack of employment opportunities. All of these things are a factor. We still don't talk about the criminalization of people as factors in losing their houselessness, housing. So if you go to jail, you're probably not going to maintain your house, right? We now have people effectively breaking into jail. There was a gentleman who got out of jail during the winter and then spent his time beating in a window so he could get back into jail because it was freezing outside, and they let him outside at like 2 a.m. in the morning or some ridiculous hour, and he wasn't able to get anywhere. And so he ended up spending a lot of time in jail. So when we look at what we're spending on houselessness, let's not be very narrow-minded and say we're just spending the money on this bond that we pass, because a significant portion of the money that we spend on houselessness actually goes to the police and our judicial system. Does that make sense?
Well, you have to.
Because we're criminalizing homelessness, and the one place a houseless person can go, right, without all these qualifiers is jail.
Yeah.
So a person who's on drugs,
That's a housing piece.
yes, the person who's on drugs
Yes.
and who maybe needs some support can probably get more support through jail
Yes,
right
that's right,
now
that's right.
than there are other
that's right, that's
support
right.
systems. And it's difficult because at the national level we're losing support, federal support, for some of the temporary systems we put into place with COVID. My son actually works with the houseless population, and unfortunately, you know, the pink slips pink slips are rolling in. But I want to be honest here. I think a lot of people have not done the management by walking. And so it's one thing to read why individuals are experiencing houselessness and categorize them. I think what's needed is sometimes to just go out and talk to folks and let them tell you their stories, because you'll be surprised how people ended up there. Some very, very educated students that look like they have great opportunities. A lot of them, unfortunately, are women. And a lot of this houselessness happens through challenges with partner relationships.
Oh, yes.
And then we have our disabled who are becoming houseless. And a lot of the work that we did with the houseless assumed that these individuals could, one, hold down a job, find a source of income, and live in a home. And actually know how to take care of that home.
Right,
yes.
That's right.
And over the years, what I've seen is that has now changed. The houseless problem that we're looking at today is not the houseless problem we were looking at 10 years ago. Okay, so we're going to need different solutions than the ones we implemented 10 years ago, because it's only going to cover a percentage of the problem. So, for example, disabled houseless individuals. Are we building the homes Are we building the ramps? Are we building the things that
The
they
vets
need
are.
to?
The vets.
Yes.
The veterans are doing a far better job
Yeah.
than anyone else ever has. Yes.
Yeah. And so, yeah, didn't even mention the veterans, of course,
Yeah.
but they're getting up in age, and
Yeah. Oh,
a lot
yeah.
of them need
Oh, yeah.
services or
Oh, yeah.
disability service as well.
Vietnam,
So
yeah.
I think our response would have been great if we had implemented it 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
It's not great now. I'll give you an example. So when we build all this affordable housing, as the population ages in general, are we building housing that's affordable for the nurses' aides and the nurses? Are we building housing that's affordable for the police department and the fire department? Because I'll tell you right now, 80% of our police officers do not live
Yeah.
in Portland. And I'm sure that some of that has to do with the cost of housing, because if you're an officer and perhaps you have a few children and a wife, the salary is not looking as good in Portland as it is in Hillsborough. So what that means is we have really an occupying force of police officers because they're not part of our community, and we need to change that. Some things I'd like to see if I had a magic wand. Let me have the magic wand for just 1 minute, okay?
Go ahead.
I'll fantasize about what I'd like to see. What I'd like to see is I'd like to see a police force that can rapidly respond to our needs in this city. As a 9/11 survivor, I've survived hurricanes, I've survived a brush with anthrax in Washington, D.C. I would like to see emergency responders in our community. We're due for, an earthquake here. And if all of our rapid responders, all of our police, 80% of our police are in other communities, if our fire officials have to live in other communities because of lack of affordability, our nurses, we're in for heaps of trouble. So I'd like to see buildings where we encourage the individuals that we're going to need to form a healthy community have space in those buildings. Yes, I'd like to see buildings where there are actually set-asides for responders in our community. And I think that's going to be necessary as the prices keep rising. Otherwise, we're going to price all of our responders, our nurses' aides, our nurses, our grocery store checkers, our truckers out of this community. And it's going to be a community of elite, and you're just going to bus people in from other communities, and that's how you're going to get it done. And what's going to happen is some of the people who can't afford to pay those wages are not going to have help. So right now, disabled people, when they go to the city, when they go to Department of Health and Human Services and they try and get aids, it's very difficult to find an aid because of the wage that they pay these individuals, which is like $16 to $18 an hour. You can't live in Portland off that. You cannot live in Portland off that. So who's going to take care of the elderly population? Number two, the second thing I'd like to see, besides set-asides for first responders, and when we consider building, not just moderate income, but also first responders, okay, is I'd like to see that when we do these leases, we could simplify a lot of these challenges by requiring 2-year leases. I know that sounds like a simple thing, right? What is that going to do? Well, it eases the chance that folks who are signing 1-year leases become houseless in that interim process, because that is a point where a lot of people who are on the border, who are just like on that line of being able to afford, they move from one location, the rent goes up at another location, and they're destabilized. So moving is destabilizing.
Yeah.
So if we had 2-year leases that had to be offered, then by a landlord, then the tenant could simply turn it down if they felt they wanted a 1-year lease. But I think it should be offered so that we can predict our school districts, so we can predict our needs for fire officials, so we can predict this. Right now, things are moving around and it makes it hard. And I think one thing that we could do to stabilize that would not have a huge expense would be to require 2-year leases to be offered And if the 2-year lease is turned down, then there should be a reason. Say, for example, I say, well, my son is coming back from college, so I can lease it to you for a year, but I'm not offering it for 2 years. And you could say, hey, that's fine with me, and I want to sign that. But otherwise, they need to have 2-year leases. Too much problems with tenants being relocated and moving around, and I just think that would help a little bit. And it's not a one-pronged solution. Anyone who says they're going to build their way out of this needs to understand that Portland has been behind in building for 3 decades. So we're not going to build our way out of this, okay? We had a housing bond that was passed in 2016, and I think I know that they built 1,300 homes, and there are different apartment complexes going up, about 15 of them, and that is going to be 1/10 of what we need for the visibly unhoused today. So if they completed every project that they have scheduled, that would be 1/10 of the houseless today.
Now, I'm going to throw something in there real quick. Like, you didn't mention temporary housing
Yes.
for homeless, as opposed to home ownership. That's a whole different ball game.
That's right.
You got my point? And how do you? And there's been this issue where they're trying to mix it up or put temporary housing mindset into home ownership. That's a problem,
Yes, it is.
because otherwise you got the other issues about the maintenance of the areas and this and that. This person here is more responsible because they own it, as opposed to this person who's renting, if you will, renting, and then again renting. That's another area. But then when you get down there to providing housing for homelessness folks aspect of it, that's not in the renting area or the leasing, the long-term leasing, this, that, and the other, because they have a little bit more of a responsibility than the homeless person. You got my point? So and then there's a big push to keep the person into the area, the total area, as if they are just like these other individuals. Hard thing to do. So like you said, I'm just responding. We're having discussion, and I'm just saying. But then the area that has promising to talk to temporary for the homeless kind of a person, putting a roof over their head, you know what I mean, and clean showers and this, that, and the other, is right up front with you. You got to commit a crime. And no, I'm just saying that's the criminal justice system.
Yes.
But I'm still saying there's a segment in the criminal justice system that could talk to temporary housing that we need to spend a little bit more time to understand what is it, and then the transition once they get through doing the time for the crime, that they can join then back into the lease area aspect of it. That's where in all due respect, then all of a sudden they can start off with if they've got a family, start off with the family first, remember, and then if they got the family aspect of it, they got a place to come back to, okay, and they've already been to kind of like through a boot camp, so they know how to maintain the property and this, that, and the other, you got me? And then from that point on, then boom, if they want to improve themselves, they can get from a 1-year lease to a 2-year lease. You got me? And then after a bit, they get a job. Then all of a sudden, they can join the renting area, because now they got the dollars to be able to rent. They can't go into home ownership at that point in time. That's a toughie. But give them something to work
there's
toward.
steps to it,
You got
definitely.
a good step aspect of it, and I think. But we're not thinking along that line. And I'm just saying, rather than just saying, okay, fine, that we got a criminal justice, these are a bunch of criminals. No. These are people that were, they had tough times. Things happen. But we, under our society, we have a democracy aspect of it. If you do something wrong, as long as you're not killing a bunch of folks and this, that, and the other, you got to do the time. And basically, the way you do the time, and as far as I'm concerned, they need to create jobs in the institution while they're there. The craft jobs, the vocational kind of jobs, where they would basically teach them how to do this, give them something of not more than what the regular
I agree, but here's the problem. The jobs that are currently given in the judicial system are not jobs that they can occupy, once again, when they get out as criminals. So your calls to DMV, you know where those go?
Talk to me.
Okay, so our judicial system already uses criminals
Yep.
to route your DMV calls
Yep.
and take all your vital information and all of that. Now, here's the issue. When they get out, because they are criminals, they are no longer
Able to take it.
qualified
Yeah.
for those jobs. And this is what I mean by houselessness being a issue that many people look at from let's give them a home. That doesn't solve the problem
No, it doesn't.
when this person is no longer able to work and be in community because they've been excluded.
But now we do have a department. It's called the Labor Department.
Yes.
Right? Unemployment
Yes.
Labor Department. It says unemployment. So I mean, you would think that if you say unemployment, that means I can go there and I say, look, I'm unemployed. What do you have for me? Okay, let's look at your resume based on your conversation. We do that piece. Okay, fine. I can fit you over here. Now that to me was supposed to. That's what the system was supposed to provide.
Well, it doesn't.
It didn't. Okay.
So what happens is you have a list of second chance employers.
Right.
That list is small.
Right.
You have a huge number of people trying to work with 10 employers.
Right. Right.
There's only so many positions that
Right.
those 10 major employers are going to be able
Right,
to have
right,
at any
right,
one time.
right,
So
right.
you're releasing a population from jail.
But small
that-
business though. But
Yeah,
see,
small business, I
small
was gonna get to
business,
that.
see, yeah, you get into the small business arena. There are all kinds of little options you can deal with. You can do a kind of a lowering the taxes or something.
Yeah, but it's
for
small business. It's Oregon good to small business.
No, but,
So-
but I'm
no.
no, we're talking about what we could use.
Yeah. So what we really need to do is look at housing and say, first of all, we've got this crisis, and then we have something that's very urgent that isn't yet a crisis, but we're going to make it a crisis. And so everyone's working on homelessness, but they're not stemming. They're working on the folks that are here, but they're not trying to stem the flow of houselessness. So rental assistance is.
Well, that's the flow of government money.
You know what I'm saying?
No
Rental
one,
assistance
no
is
one
low.
wants to talk about the real numbers
Yes.
of homeless.
Yeah.
No one's really defining the definition of
No.
what is a homeless person.
Yes.
So a person could be homeless and be living in a house.
That's right. So you can be couch surfing,
Yes,
living
yes,
with relatives,
yes,
in hotels.
yes, yes,
National
yes,
news, there was
yes.
a poor woman who was living with her
Yeah,
children in a
yeah,
car.
yeah.
And so what we need to do is, why we're working on houselessness, the people who are unhoused, is crisis. We also need to say what's coming down the pike. And what's coming down the pike we need to plan for. This is the huge influx of disabled and elderly people who are going to be houseless, and they're going to need way different services, right? So I'm thinking that this is where the 2-year leases become very important, to not destabilize people every year, right? To be able to plan better for our police force, for our school districts. It's a start, right?
Now remember now, when you get an entity that that says, I'm going to buy something to subsidize my future careers and this, that, and the other, and blah, blah, blah. And then now I'm a landlord. Then that's another job.
Yes.
Then the idea, I don't want to give up 2-year leases. I'll give a month lease, because what I've been experiencing is harder to get that person out of that. Cost me quite a bit of money. The place gets torn down. I'm just.
Oh,
I'm
yes,
just doing
I've had that.
All that kind. You've been there.
Yes, I've been there.
You got kind of a deal, and then you're sitting up there at the city, at the judge, in the front of the judge, and who's got more rights than the landlord?
Well, I think
I'm just throwing that out there to say that
we still have 72-hour
do it.
notices. We still have all of those processes, but the thing is, landlords do feel like they're in a bit of a position because they feel like the law takes too long to get them out. It's not that there aren't provisions, but what we found is that from tenants is a lot of times landlords will use alternate methods to get them out, since they can't get them out
Right,
under
right.
the current law.
Right.
But I'm still saying that our community deserves, absolutely deserves, to be stable. We absolutely deserve to know who our neighbors are.
Yeah.
We deserve
Yeah.
to know what our classroom size
Yeah.
is going to be next
Yeah. Oh,
year.
yeah, yeah.
And when we're playing musical chairs with all of our people, it's not helpful. And that critical point when a lease ends is when a lot of people become houseless.
That's right.
They just can't make that jump to the next thing. So we need to figure out how to stem the tide and keep people in their homes. So I actually want to submit this to the city council, that we have 2-year leases and that they consider this. The other thing is we need to consider not putting people out under certain conditions as well. I've seen some things that I just think aren't great, and I don't want to pull it all on the landlord, right? So we need to support the landlord. But 2-year leases technically don't cost the landlord anymore. Every time a lease turns over, most of the time things get replaced, painting, all of this stuff. This way, the landlord doesn't have to do any of that reset for 2 years. So that's the cost savings for him. Now, the challenge is, will it possibly make the landlord scrutinize the tenant a little bit more? Potentially, but they're already doing that now. So we need more programs to help people who might be challenged with that extra $100 a month or $150. That's causing a lot of people to be houseless because they're just a little bit short, or they don't make 3 times the wages. So I think we need to start looking at how to stem the houselessness. We have a housing bond for the houseless. What do we have that is really addressing the folks that month in, month out are struggling to pay their rent, and sooner or later are going to become houseless? We don't have enough to address.
That's a fact.
We don't have enough to address that.
But then at the same time, let's be from perspective, the person who bought the home and to rent their home out, they said, "This is what I want for rent."
That's right.
it. I want $100 million for it.
Yeah.
Put a sign, you know what I'm saying? And for person, this is what I want. Now, until he realizes he can't get that person in there, then he'll get anybody he can, and then tries to put that, write it up in such a fashion that it protects him from point A to point B. But then when he does that, there are all kinds of other things that comes up, because the other entity is saying, "I want to get in there, whatever is necessary." They got in there, and then look, what are my options? I know I don't have these other these other scheduled rents that I'm not going to have, but if I can get in, I can then, maybe I've been in there for 6 months.
Non-payment of rent
That's right,
does
non-payment.
not have a defense.
Yeah.
Non-payment of rent does not have a defense. So
But
someone
on
gets
our-
into your place,
But on our system, it does, to a certain degree.
someone gets in your place
Yeah.
and they don't pay rent.
Right.
So after 5 days, you can file a notice that they need to pay immediately, or you're going to take them to court.
Right.
2-3 weeks,
And
you're
then,
in
but
court.
then you got to go through that
And
court.
then there's an eviction,
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
there's a cost to an
Yeah,
eviction.
yeah.
Now that can happen any time.
That's about a year down the road, though.
Well, you know, after the 3 weeks and after you go to court, you're probably within 3 months gone. You're probably within 3 months. The exception is when you have a claim that says maybe perhaps you didn't pay because there was an issue, then the court says you pay to me, and then we'll mitigate this issue, we'll resolve it, but you'll still pay. So there is no defense to non-payment of rent. So what I'm talking about is not people saying, well, I don't want to pay rent, but they just can't pay rent.
Okay.
And so we need to figure out situations where there are hotels and they're just in one room, that kind of thing. We need to be more innovative. We're not being innovative.
Well, one area that has possibility is like the Housing Authority of Portland. I mentioned that because I'm familiar with the Housing Authority and was fighting with them on many ways from the standpoint. You need to go on. The system works. If I had a place to lease, if I want to lease a room and somebody say this, that, and the other, and I lease it to the Housing Authority of Portland, then I feel more protected because I know that they come and make the inspection of the facility, whether it's a room or 2 bedrooms or this, that, and the other. It's painted up, the whole 9-yard aspect of it. And the person, then I pay them, I would pay them. And then at the end of that lease, whatever, if all of a sudden the person don't make, they make the payment to the entity, Housing Authority of Portland. the house get maintained. The entity that leases out, and they got to come up with a fair lease from the standpoint. They just can't just basically call their own number. But no, we'll appraise it, and we'll say this is what we feel it's worth. And you put it in that particular situation, then you're protected. Outside of that particular situation, some people are just gouging or doing whatever that's necessary. But the fact of the matter is, housing is a very issue. We need, everybody has to have a place, something over their head.
Yes, and I don't believe all housing should be for profit.
That's right.
So I do believe that there are definitely people who want to own homes and own condos, but there's also a population that is never going to have the ability to own those things. So there are people who are born with disabilities and they need housing. What are they supposed to? You got Down syndrome, you're supposed to figure all this out. So it's just ridiculous that while we can't do everything right now, we shouldn't refuse to do the things that we can. And it's like everyone is looking for that one magical thing. Well, the housing crisis started with not one thing. It started with 5 or 6 things, and I have to say mass incarceration really fueled houselessness. And with the rising rents, those things combining, an aging population that is retiring, working less hours, COVID. I mean, we really have this mix of things that we need to tease out. And so when I think about what are the solutions, I tease out the problems because they each require a different solution, are approaching it a different way. So someone who's disabled is going to need a different housing solution than someone who's temporarily disabled or maybe just has a family, that's something that's taken them away from work or an illness. Way different solutions. Most of the housing that is low income housing is, well, it's not low income. So it's based.
Don't throw those other ex-criminal. No, it's housing. Okay, and then the idea is that if there was an entity, if you will, that a person can say, okay, fine, here's the resume of the individual aspect of it, and then boom, there's a house for him. But he's not going to get the nice 5-bedroom house on the coast or something like that.
No.
He's going to get a house, a clean house, right? Utilities, work, the whole 9 yards.
I'm not even for the house right now. I'm going to say that the majority of people who are on the street need to be out of the street, off the street, but in places that they can get support services and wraparound services.
But isn't that the county's job?
Yes, it is. But
then Metro said, "It's my. We getting money for it too."
Imagine if you had a hotel, and there are lots of them, right?
Okay.
So you have a hotel, and you have these individual rooms. They've got their bed. They've got a little refrigerator, right? Okay. They've got mirrors. They can take a shower. It's all self-contained because we have some mental health challenges and things like that. So some people are afraid to come inside. So let's say there's 100 rooms in this hotel, but there's also meeting spaces, right? And so you can take these meeting spaces and you can have things like how to keep your apartment clean, how to not ruin the plumbing.
I'm agreeing with you big time. But guess what? You got owners now of hotels and this, that, and the other that are trying to figure out how can I sell this to the government to guarantee my money.
We need to buy, because here's the thing. We're out there getting vouchers for people, $80, $90, $100 a day. If we own the hotel, then people could come and take their course about how to do things. I mean, seriously, I knew a gentleman who was afraid to lose his housing, and his concern was, I asked him why he wasn't using in the RV, the shower and the toilet. And I found out he was using the bathroom outside. And I was concerned, obviously, and it turned out he just did not feel comfortable because he thought he would mess something up and he would lose his housing. And I was like, oh no, that's not going to happen, but you really need to use. He was so used to being outdoors and just, that is, it's unsanitary, which is why we have dysentery. Like I said, now there's health concerns, so we need to get people into a spot in a hotel. One room is manageable. We don't want to come back and find a lot of the assistance that I do with the houseless. Besides food, the other interesting thing that is hoarding. the feeling that they need to stuff their place with everything possible,
Yeah.
and then losing their place due to hoarding.
Rodents,
Okay.
all kinds of stuff.
Yes, all kinds of reasons. So we need to talk about cleanliness. We need to talk about not putting hamburger grease down the plumbing.
yeah,
We need to talk
yeah,
about all
yeah,
sorts of things. We need to talk about children, and we need to talk about, are we going to have carpets on the floor? Are we just going to let the children run up and down the? So there's lots of things we could be doing, but we're so concentrated on, okay, we asked for the money. Now we have the money. So it's up to Metro, the city, and the county to spend the money. And what are they doing with the money?
So we elect these officials. We elect these people. And who's doing the auditing? Who's saying, okay, fine, what did you do with the money?
It's not.
And who's benefited from it? You know what I'm saying? Who are they? Are they living in the place? Did they get the services? Are we getting the job done by the order and an elected person?
Well, I think the look on the street now, we don't have a point in time. The last one was in 2022, so we have another one coming up. Yeah, the last report came out in 2023, and it was done in 2022. So we'll have another one coming up, and I don't see the numbers changing. The last report said we were up in houselessness, get this, 717%. And I can say for a fact that that point in time is only just that one point. And the reason why they stress that is because they don't get to look at everyone who's in a car, everyone who's sleeping at their desk in their office. They don't get to look at all of that. So we have had a tremendous increase in
and
houselessness.
there's a lot of money that's been spent on getting that number. And in all due respect, you'll never get the number. Why? Because you got people living in housing that's already homeless. They're homeless. They're a check away. You hear it all the time. I'm a check away from being.
And that's why I say we need to get that support, because while we think this is bad, there could be a tsunami. A tsunami is coming,
It'll wipe
because
it
you're
out.
not going to tell older disabled folks that you can go out there and get a job, because the solution here is, oh, we'll get them in a house, we'll get them a job. That's for a certain population, right? But you're not going to tell a 65-year-old person who's in a wheelchair who has some help. That's a whole different solution.
Well, in all due respect, the reason why it is that way with that 65-year-old person or 70-year-old person is that, wait a minute. When I was coming up and paying my dues and working day in and day out, I saw these issues, but they were being that was never an issue. It was a city of Portland. It was a city of roses. I can go down and have a cup of coffee downtown and with no problem, and this, that, and the other. I mean, peddling, man, very rarely you see somebody asking for a dime or this, that, and the other, and you give it to them anyway. But there was no such thing. But I'm talking again. That's that golden hours that I talk about, and then that's why, and that's something that we've got to talk about, because we have such a divide. We've got the folks who are seniors, who have gone through the process and had a good life. You know what I mean? That they weren't rich, but everybody had their, they were in their lane, respective lane. And now today it's a different ball game. You can win the lotto. That's the only opportunity you can get to get the multi and go through a lottery or something like that and win the lotto or something like that. And everybody's still putting monies in that piece. But the fact of the matter is, and then that third group, the freshman group, they really have not been exposed to this stuff. But the junior group has had some exposure because they lived at home and they knew parents and this, that, and the other that had that quality. Once they've gone, this person has gotten nothing.
Yeah,
I'm just kind of like throwing in the so I think, and then the people who are basically owning these homes or renting these homes for whatever, whether they're giving their family or just making a couple extra bucks or this, that, and the other, they say, wait a minute, I'm not going to do this stuff over here. I'm here. So we need just to communicate that transition. That's what we were talking about with reference to the government piece. I mean, my last guest was point blank was, hey, the old system worked. We had the mayor who basically made sure that we were on course, and then we had the bureaus that you could call up. People would pick up the phone. They don't do that anymore.
Well, they weren't picking up the phone before
I know,
these
but-
people
but
got
not-
into
but not as
position.
much.
So let's say
But-
that. But I will say that the number of individuals in office mathematically doesn't work out to the best system, mathematically. Having said that, if they're actually going to get out in their communities and do the job, it's absolutely could work. But thus far, a lot of the individuals who are elected, I haven't seen them in the communities. I get out in the community a lot. You think I would find them someplace. Now, what I haven't been doing is I haven't been attending the partisan events. The reason why I haven't been attending the partisan events is we don't need partisan solutions right now. We need to talk with everyone, have everyone at the table so that we can come up with some solutions. This is not a Republican problem. This is not a Democratic problem. This is a problem that we need to solve together by having conversations.
Right, but the bottom line is that it's too late when we have the election. See, we can talk about, hopefully that's where the media comes in, just basically letting the people know what is going on in the area and within their respective community, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then we say, okay, fine, these are some of the major issues, homelessness and this, that, and the other. Okay, that's a problem. So now we're going to have a vote. We're going to have an election, et cetera, et cetera. And then that entity, i.e. that entity either goes back and pick up to do the research and read the papers and find out this, that, and the other, knock on doors and this, that, and the other, and say, okay, fine, hey, I got some answers, I got some solutions, I got some answers. In fact, even get interviewed, because the papers interview you when you run for office.
The other thing is I think I want to stop calling this a houses crisis.
That's right.
I think I'd like to call it something else. I'd like to call it a drug epidemic. I'd like to call it an epidemic of apathy about what happens to our seniors and our disabled folks. I'd like to call it apathetic about our veterans, because they constitute a large percentage of folks on our street. My father was a Marine. My family helped integrate the military in the United States. So I have a special place in my heart for the veterans, and I just don't see them getting all the services that they need. I know that you definitely know about getting these services, but I feel like we're sending so much money. I know we're supposed to be talking local, but we're sending so much money overseas. We got to spend some money on our own folks. This is no longer a crisis that can be solved with housing. So calling it a housing crisis is a little different. So we have a moral crisis. We have a drug problem. We have a dysfunctional
Public
government.
safety problem. We got a public safety problem.
Okay,
Big
Metro's
time.
been collecting money,
Yep.
and I don't recall the amount right now, but at least 120 something. Where are we spending that? So we have a problem with where we're spending our funds, how we're spending our funds, and the pace. That was what Jessica Vega Peterson was criticized for, was the rate at which she was spending the money that was already corrected to address the houselessness. And I think one of the challenges that she had to be fair is when she probably looked at it, she realized what I looked at. Okay, we can't just put people in places anymore, because now we have other issues. And so now we need
But she should
mental...
have, but in all due respect, the system we were living under responded to that. You can't get in that seat and the individual, two different individuals. When you hit in that seat, you're supposed to have answers.
Yes.
It's no OJT when you sit in that seat.
If I had a magic wand, I wouldn't wait for anybody to build anything.
That's
And
right. See, when you sit in that seat, the expectation from the public, the voting public, is that you've got an answer to my problem, because that's what it should be. But that's not what we're living with today, just like with this new form of government aspect of it. Just look at the process of the flow. And I just mentioned homeless. I keep mentioning homelessness because if you can solve that problem, that pretty well identifies with all the other entities.
yes, it is true. It's like it touches everything.
It touches everything.
Everyone has to be housed.
Everything.
Like, for example, public transportation. I
yes.
like to use public
Yes,
transportation,
yes.
especially when it's warm.
Yes.
Encourages me to walk. But
Yes.
here's the thing. I got on public transportation a few months ago, and I went to work, and there was someone on public transportation using drugs.
Yeah.
And I just feel like at my age, I don't need to lose any more brain cells.
yeah.
And so all of this touches on on houselessness and trying to invite people back to downtown. Houselessness. I personally think we could reinvigorate downtown. I'd like to see the Chinese opera come back to downtown. There are people who would love to come back. The Chinese community was forced out. Remember when they talked about how the houselessness was affecting their community? They weren't listened to. And so now we're at a point where people say, oh, we're just going to buy houses and that's going to fix the problem. 10 years ago, that would have fixed the problem. Now we have new problems. We have a drug crisis. One of the challenges that we have within this drug crisis is, do you know there aren't any places that accept pregnant women who are drug affected with like meth and things like that? So that we really need to expand those services.
We got a lot of issues.
We need to work on disabled, and we need to build, but we can't build our way out of it. I'm saying we take some of that money and we maybe buy a couple hotels. And we use those hotels.
But then at the same time, you know, you think about, again, the hotels. The hotels were like a commodity. Just like when you come to Oregon, we were a tourist town, so to speak. You come in, you go downtown. We had the water sitting up there. You can go sit up there. You can walk in the water. You can run down the deal and all that kind of deal routine. That was a special place. It was a place to just get out of your own home.
That's right.
And just go out and rent an apartment down there, whatever, downtown, and just spend the weekend on the whatever, you know, that kind of a deal. And then all of a sudden, we got into the housing deal, the homeless thing. And folks were down there urinating on the street and pooping here and doing that kind of a routine. I'm just saying, because I've always maintained whenever they came up with these areas where it fed the homeless, they should have basically made sure those places that fed people actually had an area for them to eat that food and an area that they can poop.
I have to say,
I got to be right up front with it. I'm not trying to be negative about it, but they should be able to have somewhere. They got to.
You're right.
They got to.
So
and
when
we
I
haven't done that. So who wants to look at that?
When I
as
looked
a tourist?
I understand. When I looked at feeding, I went to a church.
Okay.
And I said, we're going to feed people at night.
Yeah.
Because everyone feeds people at day, and then there's nothing at night. People miss that or have doctor's appointments or things they need to do. And so I started feeding people at night. And a church volunteered the space. Currently, I do not work out of a space, but I feed people in the parks. And when I feed people in the parks, I do take the trash and remove all the trash, and I'm responsible for all of that. But there is a serious lack of bathrooms.
That's right.
Downtown.
So what? And they got
to. And so, yeah, we need to.
How rich you are. You got to poop.
That is why dysentery is a major problem.
Exactly.
And so we can give towelettes and things like that.
That's why I make the point about downtown Portland.
Yes.
You can't have an individual pooping and peeing. Look, I'm a tourist. We've lost that income. The small businesses and this, that, and the other. Because if you got restaurants and this, that, and the other, you can go in and pay your deal, and you've got an area you can poop, right? A whole 9 yards. But the homeless is a whole different ball game. So how do you stop the people? Well, like I said,
you give them places that were actually functional for them.
No, you don't give them where they eat is where they poop.
Yes.
You give them that first
but
poop.
you can't.
Like you're
not going to be able to control that.
I know that.
So
but
you have places like Blanchard House that does a wonderful job of feeding people. They have restrooms. People can sit there and be comfortable. There are also day spaces where people go, and they can get mail and things like that. So they're addressing part of that problem. But there are also people who, through disability or drug addiction, are not able to get to those places.
Folks, in all due respect, God knows, I don't want anybody to get in that kind of an arena anyway. The drugs and this, that, and the other. You know what I'm saying? But if they fit that kind of category, they should not be in that mainstream situation that upsets that. Because that entity is the one that pays for that.
Yeah, but it's not the majority. I want to clarify
it's
that.
A small minority.
The drug addiction level for the houses has gone up. So when I first started, it was very few. And then they were targeted. They were really targeted because the hopelessness makes it easy to try things. But there's a lot of young people who are houseless too, who have aged out of the foster care system.
Well, that's why we talk.
They're not drug addicted.
Yeah.
They just need a gap. They need a gap.
But they get
couple years.
But they're getting there.
Well,
I hate to put it that way.
we hope that we can get them into some school programs and other things that are available. They just don't have the guidance. So I think that's another thing where we have foster children. Why not a dormitory type setup for young people to continue their education and to get what they need so they don't become houseless? One more thing I'm going to drop on you. We need to talk about women, okay? We need to talk about women. The last few months, I want to say that Senator Merkley has really been a terrific person helping me to get some women help that they need from domestic violence. But domestic violence is making a lot of women houseless. They flee their home because they fear for their lives. They take their children with them, and they go places to get help where they may or may not get help. And that's what nationally, has been a problem for a lot of women for eons. Portland still does not have an adequate solution for addressing spousal abuse, domestic, intimate partner violence.
I'm agreeing with you.
And out on the street, we're just saying, well, everybody's the same. The woman with 3 kids going up to the hotel for the night, the 2 kids aren't drug addicted. The woman's not drug. So we're lumping them, but they need different solutions.
Yeah,
you see what I'm saying?
I know.
You got to get out there and see those different solutions.
Like I said, you've talked about these issues.
And immigrants. You got the immigrants who are houseless too.
Not only have you talked about these issues, you've done something about these issues. So where are these other people? Now imagine, in fact, I made a statement when I was working for the bank. And at one point in time, I was working in the bank and kind of like in a marketing kind of a deal aspect of it. And then we'd go down to the Benson Hotel. This was back when. And I remember when the Vietnamese situation, the war was over, and people were concerned, folks from in the downtown area, in Benson, the Chamber of Commerce kind of a deal. And then I was one of the reps that went down there to sit down and listen to what's going on, dealing with the whole issue with the immigrants that are coming from Vietnam. Okay? And so everybody was saying, well, gee, they need this, and this, and they need this, and this, that, and the other. And I'm sitting up there, and I said, so I raised my hand up, and I said, well, maybe what we can do is that, what if each one of us take one home with us? The clothes. Call Goodwill, call this. But at the same time, I was very much involved with United Way. And they took in the money from the corporation, because I worked there at one point in time. They took the money, but they also had the issues, specific issues and solutions. And that's who they would give the money to, and they would audit it just to make sure that the system was working. United Way.
This brings to mind.
We got about 5 minutes, but I
want to leave you with this, okay?
No, but we're doing good. I just want to make a point.